Every day for a medieval miller is a relentless struggle against exhaustion, hunger, suspicion, filth, disappointment, and constant distrust. His work is hard, thankless, and dangerous, and hope is always in short supply. This story will not keep you awake with thrilling plot twists. Instead, it might lull you to sleep with its slow, drawn out routine and the gritty details of a hard, monotonous life. After all, the miller, like his mill, is doomed to repeat the same cycle over and over as long as he has the strength to get up each morning and start the millstones turning once again. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now get cozy. We're about to begin. You wake up in darkness and you are already tired. There is no such thing as waking up refreshed. That idea does not belong to people like you, the millers of this world, whose every joint creaks before the rooster even bothers to try his luck with the dawn. In your little damp house that always smells faintly of sour grain and old sweat, the morning comes in the form of a bone deep chill and the unmistakable itching caused by yesterday's flour still clinging to your skin despite all attempts to wash it off with that barely warm bucket of water last night. There is no real silence here, not ever. The wind sighs and groans through the boards of your walls. Sometimes it shrieks in the eaves, but mostly it creeps and mutters, promising another day of drafts and splinters. The mice have never been polite enough to sleep through the night. Somewhere in the straw, they scratch and gnaw at the corners of your reality, hoping to find a forgotten crumb. You pretend not to hear, mostly because you do not have the energy to wage war on mice before breakfast. That will be a problem for later, like everything else. Your bed is more a suggestion of comfort than an actual piece of furniture. A warped slab of wood with a thin mattress if you are feeling generous. It sags in the middle, always damp, always cold, no matter how many blankets you pile on. This is your home. If you are lucky, your wife has not yet begun her morning litany of sighs, curses, and the very specific complaints about the state of your roof, your boots, your prospects, and, most importantly, your attitude. She will find a way to make this your fault, as she always does. Not that she is wrong. You rise because there is no point in staying in bed. The sun has not bothered to show its face, but you know you have work to do. There is always work to do. You have tried counting how many days you have woken up this way, but somewhere around the time you realized that every day is exactly the same, you stopped counting. The years slip by like the slow trickle of water through your leaky roof, constant, relentless, and ultimately deeply disappointing. The first thing you do is scratch yourself. This is not some idle gesture or a mark of slovenliness. It is the first ritual of your day, a private act of rebellion against the grinding, unchanging filth that comes with being a miller. The flour gets everywhere, on your hands, in your beard, under your nails, between your toes, even in places you would rather not think about. You have come to accept that this is simply how it is. You could try to scrub it off, but it never really leaves you. If you ever dared to dream of being clean, you have long since abandoned the fantasy. You sit on the edge of your bed and listen to your own bones complain. Outside, you can hear the distant clatter of hooves, perhaps someone from the next village already heading out with a load of grain. There is a certain comfort in knowing you are not alone in your misery. You stretch slowly, methodically, as though preparing for battle, and, in a way, you are. Your clothes wait for you, piled in a heap at the foot of the bed. They do not smell much better than you do, but at least they are dry, or dry enough. You dress by touch, your hands moving through the familiar routine: shirt, hose, tunic, belt, boots. Each piece feels heavier than it should, as if soaked with the combined disappointments of 1,000 mornings, just like this one. You step outside, and the air bites at your face. The sky is a muddy gray, stubbornly refusing to offer any hint of beauty or hope. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, muddy, and dotted with the refuse of daily living: chicken droppings, scraps of straw, the occasional dead mouse. You trudge toward the mill, which stands hulking at the edge of the village, half shrouded in morning mist. It is yours, for whatever that is worth. This place is both your livelihood and your curse. Every board and stone is yours to maintain, yours to fret over, yours to repair when something inevitably breaks. You are the miller. You are expected to make the best of this place, to keep the wheels turning and the grain flowing. If the mill fails, it is your fault. If there is not enough flour, your fault again. If the wind is bad, the water too low, the crops too poor, somehow it is all your fault. Your neighbors do not love you. They respect you in the way people respect the man who controls the thing they need. They come to you with their sacks of grain, always suspecting you are cheating them, always counting every handful of flour you give back. They tell stories about millers. Millers are sly, millers are greedy, millers are always skimming a little off the top. Sometimes you wonder if they are right. Sometimes you wonder if it even matters. But for now, the day is beginning. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the sharp scent of wet earth and the ever present tang of flour. You look at your hands, cracked, raw, dusted white, and remember that you are not a man, not really, but a miller. You are the necessary evil at the heart of village life, forever waking before the sun, forever tired, forever covered in flour that no amount of scratching will ever remove. You get to work. There is nothing else to do. You have barely set foot outside your doorway, and already the day finds new ways to challenge your resolve. The cold does not wake you. You were never really asleep. It is the realization that you must now rid yourself and your living space of yesterday's flour, yesterday's crumbs, and the ever present, relentless rats. There is a certain routine to it all, a monotony you have long ago stopped questioning. You brush the crusts of sleep from your eyes, but mostly you brush away the dried bits of flour that collect in the folds of your skin, the creases of your clothing, and the corners of your little room. It is almost a joke. You are never fully clean. At this point, you are more flour than flesh, more dust than man. Your hands are rough and cracked. You try to rub at the places where the flour has hardened into little cakes against your knuckles, but it only flakes off in white, itchy dust. Your fingernails are perpetually rimmed with a pale outline, no matter how hard you scrub. Once, perhaps, you cared about your appearance, about cleanliness, about not looking like something that has been dragged through a sack of grain and left to dry in the wind. But these days, you consider it a small victory if the flour on your face does not fall in clumps into your morning gruel. And then there are the rats. Oh, the rats. They are the true lords of the mill. No matter how many traps you set, how many times you chase them with your battered broom, they always return. They move in the walls, in the dark, in the shadowy places beneath the boards and behind the sacks. They are your constant companions, uninvited, unwelcome, but undeniably part of your life. You do not hate them, not really. You are too tired for hatred, but you do resent their confidence, their audacity. They skitter across the floor, bold as knights, eyes glittering in the dim light, as if daring you to stop them. Sometimes, in your more generous moods, you imagine they are fellow workers, drawn to the grain just as you are, just trying to survive another day. Most of the time, though, you just want them gone. You find one this morning, rooting around in the corner by the hearth. Its peau fur is patchy, its tail long and sinuous, its teeth bared in a perpetual snarl. You sigh, pick up your trusty broom, which has more splinters than bristles, and shuffle over. The rat regards you with something like contempt. You stamp your foot. It does not flinch. You wave your broom. It flicks its tail as if laughing at your efforts. Finally, with a growl, you lunge, and the rat scurries off into a crack between the stones. You know you have not won. The battle is lost before it begins. For every rat you chase away, 3 more are waiting. You wonder, not for the first time, if the rats consider you an intruder in their home rather than the other way around. The rest of your morning is spent in similar fashion. You sweep the floor, gathering up little drifts of flour and grain, watching as the dust rises in lazy, mocking spirals. You empty the sweepings outside, only to see them blow right back in through the broken door. You try to patch the holes in the walls with wads of old rags and mud, but the wood is too warped, the gaps too wide. The wind, the flour, the rats, nothing can be kept out for long. You take stock of your kitchen, a few blackened pots, a wooden bowl, a crust of bread so hard you could use it as a weapon. You break your fast on yesterday's leftovers, chewing slowly, not really tasting anything. The flour in the air settles on your food, adding its own peculiar flavor, a gritty reminder of your chosen profession. Or more accurately, the profession that has chosen you. Outside, the first faint hints of sunlight are beginning to creep over the horizon. You hear the distant clatter of hooves again, closer now. Soon the peasants will arrive, lugging their sacks of grain, eyes already narrowed in suspicion, voices ready to accuse. But for a few moments longer, you have the place to yourself and the rats. You move through your house, broom in hand, knocking on the walls and stamping on the floor. Every now and then, you catch a flash of movement, a scurrying shape disappearing behind a sack or under a board. You curse under your breath, but you do not bother to shout. The rats do not listen. They never do. At times, you catch yourself talking to them. Go on, get out, you mutter, as if the rats might suddenly develop a sense of propriety. This is my house. I pay the taxes, I do the work. You lot just take and take. The rats, of course, do not reply. If they did, you suspect the conversation would not go in your favor. Once, years ago, you tried to get a cat. The cat lasted 3 days. The rats chased it off, or perhaps it simply decided that sharing a house with you was more misery than it could bear. Either way, you have not tried again. As you finish your cleaning, such as it is, you pause to look around. The place is not clean, not really. It will never be clean. The flour has seeped into every crack, every surface, every piece of furniture. The rats will return, as they always do. Tomorrow, you will wake up to the same routine, the same struggle, the same endless cycle of flour and vermin. You step outside, brush the worst of the flour from your clothes, and take a deep breath. The morning air is sharp, but it cannot mask the ever present scent of grain and sweat and rats. You wonder, as you do every day, if there is a better life somewhere out there, a life without flour in your hair, without rats in your bed, without the endless grinding monotony of being a medieval miller. But you are here, and the work must go on. The rats are your neighbors, your enemies, your companions. The flour is your burden and your inheritance. You shoulder your broom, square your shoulders, and prepare to face another day. After all, the mill will not run itself, and neither will the rats ever truly leave. You trudge through the morning muck, boots squelching in the slurry of yesterday's rain and the offal that seeps from every corner of the village. The mill looms ahead, a squatting silhouette against the reluctant dawn, battered by the wind and eternally out of place, as though some giant child had left it behind as a broken toy. The villagers call it your mill with a sneer, but the mill belongs to no one and nothing. It belongs to time, to weather, and to the slow decay that claims everything in its own good season. You reach the sagging door. The hinges protest as you shove it open, scraping a fresh wound in the mud at your feet. Inside, the darkness is almost tangible, thick with the sour smell of old grain, mouse droppings, and the mysterious rot that settles into wood and never leaves. For a moment, you just stand there, letting your eyes adjust. This is your world, such as it is. The first order of business is the millstones. They are the heart of the operation, the ancient, pitted discs of granite that have crushed more dreams than they have wheat. You inherited them, As all millers do, a gift from the previous generation, worn down by centuries of labor, patched and repatched until no one remembers what they looked like new. They are the reason your back aches and your hands are always raw. They are also the only reason anyone in the village tolerates your existence. You circle the stones with all the reverence of a priest inspecting a sacred altar. But there is nothing holy here, only the dull ache of necessity. The upper stone is chipped, a reminder of the time last winter when a bit of iron got mixed in with the rye. That day, the mill shrieked like a dying animal, and you spent 3 hours on your knees, swearing and weeping as you pried the offending shard free. The scar remains. Every morning, you check it, half hoping it will finally give way so you can close the mill and spend a day in bed. But the stone, like you, is too stubborn to break all at once. You squat beside the lower stone, running your fingers over its gritty surface. There is a rhythm to the inspection. Check for new cracks, brush away the accumulations of flour and dust. Listen for the telltale click of a pebble wedged somewhere it should not be. Sometimes you imagine you can hear the stone breathe, as if it, too, is alive, sighing under the weight of all it must grind. There is always maintenance to be done. You tighten the wooden clamps with numb fingers, wincing as splinters press under your nails. The tools you use are older than you are: bent iron wrenches, wooden mallets slick with oil and sweat, leather straps that have been repaired so often they are more patch than strap. Nothing ever fits quite right. Nothing is ever perfect, but you make do because that is what millers do. You notice a patch of rot at the base of the hopper, not for the first time. You poke it with a stick. It crumbles a little more, but you tell yourself it will last another day. Repairs are for the days when something falls apart entirely. Until then, you keep things together with prayers, curses, and whatever bits of wood you can scrounge from abandoned fences or broken carts. Every repair is temporary. Every patch is a promise you know you cannot keep. The gears are next. You bend low to peer at the interlocking wooden teeth squinting through the dim light. They are worn, but still grip each other with grim determination, much like the people who depend on this place. You pour a little oil over the axles, rubbing it in with a strip of rag, feeling the familiar stickiness between your fingers. The smell is sharp and unpleasant, but at least it means the machinery will turn a little more smoothly until it does not. You step back, surveying your handiwork. The mill is ready, or as ready as it ever gets. The wind rattles the shutters, whispering threats. You know that soon enough, someone will come complaining about the sound the stones make or the way the flour smells. Someone will demand an explanation for why the mill produces less flour than last year or why there is grit in the bread. You will listen, you will nod, you will apologize and promise to do better. And then you will return to these stones, these gears, this slow crumbling, and do exactly as you always have. You move through the mill, tidying as you go, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Loose boards are hammered down. Empty sacks are gathered into a heap, ready to be filled with tomorrow's disappointment. You sweep the floor, though you know it will be filthy again by midday. You check the windows, stuffing rags into the gaps where the cold leaks through. In one corner, a spider weaves a web between the beams. You leave it be. At least the spider is catching something. By the time you finish, the day has brightened to a pale gray, and the first sounds of the village begin to drift through the walls. A dog barking, a child crying, the low murmur of voices. Soon the peasants will come, carrying sacks of grain and burdens of suspicion. They will ask you if the mill is working, as if you might have decided to let it rest for a day. You will smile your thin, tired smile and assure them that everything is in order. You sit for a moment on the edge of an empty flour sack, listening to the wind moan in the eaves. The mill stands ready, such as it is. You have done your part. Now you wait for the world to bring you its troubles, to grind them down as best you can. It is a ritual as old as the stones themselves. Inspection, repair, acceptance. The mill never truly works. It never truly fails. Like you, it simply endures, bearing the weight of another day. And as you sit in the half light, hands coated in dust, bones aching with the familiar certainty of another endless day, you realize, though you have tried your best to forget, that nothing here ever really changes. The stones keep turning, the wood keeps rotting, the rats keep returning. You are just another part of the mill, worn down by time, patched up with hope and desperation, waiting for the next crack to appear. This is your morning. This is your life, and you would not dare call it your own. The time for reflection is over. Duty, dull and familiar, demands your body. It always begins with the sacks. The sacks are everywhere, piled by the door, slumped against the walls, slouched in corners like drunken peasants after a festival. Some are new, tight and bulging with fresh harvest. Most are old, patched so many times they look like patchwork ghosts, stained with the sweat and spilled tears of their owners. Each one is heavy in a different, particular way, and each one threatens to break your back or your spirit, or sometimes both. You flex your hands, cracked and flour stained, and reach for the nearest sack. The rough canvas bites your palms as you heave it up, hoisting it onto your shoulder. Your spine protests, an old complaint. The weight is not so terrible on its own, but it is never just one sack. It is always sack after sack after sack, day after day, year after year. The weight adds up, and you bear it all, because who else will? You stagger toward the grinding mechanism, every step a minor negotiation with gravity and exhaustion. Sometimes the sack slips, and a little shower of grain tumbles out through a hole you did not see. You do not bother to stop it. A handful of grain is nothing, you tell yourself, though you know how much every kernel matters when the harvest is poor. Inside the mill, the air is already thick with dust. There is no escaping it. It swirls in lazy clouds whenever you move, clinging to your skin, your clothes, the inside of your nose and throat. You cough, a dry, rasping sound that echoes off the beams and stones, mixing with the constant drone of the machinery. You have learned not to worry about the cough. The cough is as much a part of you as your hands or your regrets. Every movement makes the dust rise. You pour grain from sack to hopper, watching the golden cascade turn instantly pale and ghostly. The dust settles on your eyelashes, tickles your nostrils, coats your tongue. There are moments when it feels like you are drowning in flour, suffocating slowly but persistently. It seeps into every orifice, a gentle, relentless invasion. You remember, vaguely, that there are people who die from breathing too much dust. You do not know their names, but you think of them often. Some days, when the light slants just so through a crack in the wall, you can see the air itself, the motes dancing and swirling, a slow ballet of all the things that will one day turn your lungs to stone. It is almost beautiful in a hopeless sort of way. You used to hate it, but now you accept it. The dust is a part of the mill, a part of you. You are the miller, and you are made of dust. You keep moving, sack after sack. You carry them from the entrance to the heart of the mill. You do not count how many. Counting only makes the task seem longer, heavier. Each one is just another step in an endless procession, another small sacrifice to the god of bread and hunger. You try not to think about the villagers who will eat the bread made from this flour. You try not to imagine their faces, their mouths, their eyes watching you, judging you, blaming you for every stone in their bread and every hunger pain that will not fade. Your back aches, your shoulders burn, your head throbs from the effort of lifting, carrying, pouring. Sweat slicks your skin, and the dust clings to it, turning you into a creature of clay and flour, part human, part machine. There is no grace in your movements, only the brute endurance of someone who cannot afford to stop. Sometimes the sacks break. Sometimes the grain spills everywhere, and you curse, bending to scoop it up by hand, cursing again as your knees crack and your breath catches in your chest. There are always losses, rats, leaks, broken sacks, theft. No one ever thanks the miller for what he saves, only blames him for what is lost. You pause for a moment, resting against a stack of sacks, your breath coming in shallow, dusty gasps. Outside, the world carries on. You can hear the shouts of children, the barking of dogs, the clatter of a cartwheel in the lane. Life is happening elsewhere, beyond these walls. Here, there is only the mill, the sacks, and the dust. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a streak of flour and sweat. Your mouth is dry, your throat raw. You take a sip of water from a battered jug, grimacing at the taste. The dust is in the water too. There is no escaping it. Eventually, you finish the job. The sacks are stacked in their proper places. The grain is ready for the stones, and you are a little more tired than you were an hour ago. Your muscles throb with a slow, familiar pain, and your lungs itch with the promise of another cough. You stand in the middle of the mill, surrounded by sacks, dust, and silence, and you feel, just for a moment, like a statue carved from flour and fatigue. But there is no time for rest. There is always more to do. You brush the worst of the dust from your clothes, knowing it will never truly come off. You look at your hands, at the flour in the lines of your palms, and you wonder how much longer they will last. Another day, another week, another year. You do not know. You do not dare to hope. The only certainty is the dust and the weight and the endless grinding work. You hear them before you see them, peasants approaching the mill, trudging through the mud with their sacks of grain slung over hunched shoulders. Their voices drift through the morning air, muffled and discontented, a steady chorus of grievances that has not changed since the first time a man ground grain into flour. You think, not without irony, that if the world were to end, the last sound would be a peasant complaining to his miller about the quality of his flour. They come in small groups, sometimes whole families, with children trailing behind like tired shadows. Some carry their grain on their backs, others use battered carts with wheels that squeak and groan. A few ride donkeys or oxen, but most rely on the strength of their own bodies, which are no stronger than necessity allows. You watch as they approach, heads bowed against the wind, faces lined with worry and suspicion. The first to arrive is old Marek, his back as bent as a willow branch after a storm. He grunts as he drops his sack by the door, wipes his forehead with a sleeve blackened by years of labor, and regards you with narrowed eyes. It is less than last year, he mutters, not for the first time, and certainly not the last. The field is cursed, or perhaps it is the mill, or perhaps it is you. You have no answer that will satisfy him. You have heard every complaint there is to hear. The wheat is poor, the rye is riddled with stones, the barley is thin and bitter, the rain was too late, the sun too weak, the locusts too many. Sometimes you wonder if you are the one who brings misfortune simply by existing. It would explain much. Marek's wife, Jadwiga, arrives behind him, clutching a smaller sack and a child with a runny nose. She looks at you the way people look at a stray dog, part fear, part disdain, part pity. Last time, the flour was dark, she says. It made my bread heavy. My husband was not pleased. She does not mention that Marek is never pleased, but her eyes say it for her. The next group is no more cheerful. Anna the widow, whose husband drowned in the river 3 years past, brings her 2 sons and a basket of rye so meager it is a wonder she bothered to bring it at all. She does not complain, but her silence is louder than words. The boys scowl at you as if you personally arranged the death of their father and the failure of the last 3 harvests. There are others too. Tomasz, whose hands shake from cold or drink, or both. Lena, who is always suspicious that you have stolen some of her flour. Piotr, who never speaks but always watches, as though waiting for you to slip up. Each of them comes with their grain, their hopes, and their particular shade of disappointment. The complaints begin almost immediately, a symphony of accusations and grievances. You took too much last time. My flour was full of stones. The bread will not rise. There was a mouse in my sack. Do you keep them as pets, Miller? They speak over each other, their voices rising and falling like the tide, washing over you, waves of blame. You listen because there is nothing else you can do. You know what they think of you. The miller is always the outsider, the necessary evil. You stand between their labor and their bread, and for that they will never forgive you. If the flour is good, it is because the grain was good. If it is bad, it is because you have cheated them, stolen from them, ruined their hard work. You have tried to explain once or twice that the mill grinds what it is given, that no magic happens here. But they do not want explanations. They want someone to blame. Some complaints are more creative than others. One woman insists that your mill is haunted, that the flour carries the souls of those who have died within its walls. You almost laugh. Almost. Others grumble about the rats, about the dust, about the wind. A few try to bargain with you, offering eggs or cheese or promises in exchange for a little more flour. You are tempted, but you know better. If you give in to one, you must give in to all. Through it all, you maintain your miller's face, bland, unyielding, a mask of indifference that hides the small, daily wounds these words inflict. You nod, you grunt, you shrug. You take their grain, measure it as fairly as you can, and stack the sacks by the grinding stones. You do not hurry. You do not smile. You are as much a fixture of the mill as the old stones themselves. Sometimes, as you work, you catch snippets of their conversations. They speak of you as if you are not there. He is richer than any of us. Look at his mill. His wife wears shoes in winter. I heard he hides silver in the flour sacks. You want to laugh at the absurdity of it. Your life, such as it is, could not be further from their rumors. But rumors are as much a part of the village as mud and hunger. They cling to you, invisible but inescapable, and you have learned not to bother correcting them. By midday, the last of the peasants have arrived, and the yard is full of carts and children and stray dogs. The air hums with tension. You work in silence, sorting the sacks, weighing them, marking each with a bit of chalk. Some of the villagers linger, watching you as if expecting you to pull gold from the grain or poison from the flour. Their eyes follow your every move. At last, the grain is inside, the complaint spent for now, though you know they will return tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. You close the door behind you, shutting out the sound of their voices. For a few moments, there is peace, a thin, fragile thing, but peace nonetheless. You know it will not last. The complaints will return, as they always do. The villagers will never trust you, never thank you, never see you as anything but the man who stands between them and their bread. You are not a neighbor. You are the miller, and in this place that is almost as bad as being a rat. You sigh, wipe your hands on your apron, and prepare for the next round. The grinding of grain, the grinding of nerves, the grinding of hope into dust. The day is only half over, and already you feel a century old. This is the life you live. This is the work you do, and for all their complaints, tomorrow they will come again, sacks in hand, hoping for a miracle, or at least for bread that does not taste of dust and disappointment. There is a certain solemnity as you prepare to set the mill in motion, though no one outside the trade would recognize it. The villagers have deposited their grain and, for now, returned to their homes or found excuses to linger outside, discussing which of their woes can most convincingly be blamed on the miller this week. Inside, you are left alone in the echoing gloom, with only the sound of the wind and the slow, damp thud of your own heart for company. You move to the heart of the mechanism, the place where old wood and older stone conspire to grind grain into something that almost resembles hope. You pause for a moment, hand on the great lever, and look at the machine as if it might answer your unspoken question: will you work today, or will you betray me? It would not be the first time. A mill is a complicated, cantankerous beast. Outsiders think it is just a question of wind or water and a few turning wheels. But you know better. The stones can seize, the gears can slip, the belts can fray, the grain can jam the hopper or spill out in a white waterfall that coats everything with a fresh layer of ruin. You start every day expecting something to go wrong, and most days you are not disappointed. You glance up at the sky as if you can bargain with the wind. It is fickle, never blowing when you need it most, sometimes roaring in with enough force to tear the sails and send a shiver through every ancient beam. Today, you feel a gust, a good omen perhaps, or just a reminder that your fate is never truly your own. With a grunt, you pull the lever. The old mechanism shudders, creaks, complains. You hear the groan of timber and the first reluctant turn of the great wheel. Every sound is magnified in your mind, every tremor in the floorboards, a possible disaster. You listen, holding your breath, for that telltale snap or clatter that would signal a broken cog, a splintered shaft, an end to your day's work, and perhaps your income for the week. But the wheel turns. The stones begin their slow, circular dance, grinding against each other with a dull, relentless music. The belts shiver, the pulleys shudder. The whole building seems to settle into itself, shaking loose a rain of old dust and bits of straw from the ceiling. You have learned not to flinch at this. If the mill falls on your head, at least you will have an answer for the next villager who asks why the bread is full of splinters. You feed the first scoop of grain into the hopper. It rattles down, vanishing between the stones, and a cloud of fine flour puffs up to greet you, stinging your eyes, scratching at your throat. You cough, already regretting that you have forgotten your cloth mask. It is probably just as well. No piece of rag can keep out all the dust in this place. You could wrap yourself head to toe and still find flour in your nose and ears by evening. Now the rhythm begins. Scoop, pour, listen, scoop, pour, watch. You have to pay attention to the sound of the stones. A miller's ear is trained to every pitch and whine. A healthy millstone sings in a deep, slow rhythm. A sick one screams. You pray, not for the first time, that today the stones will not scream. You hear a new sound, high and sharp. For a moment your heart stops, cold and small in your chest. Is it the gears, the belts? You strain to listen. It is only a bit of dry grain scraping the inside of the hopper, a false alarm. But the fear lingers, a tightness in your chest. You know too well how easily the mill can turn against you. You remember last winter when the upper stone cracked and half the village stood outside, shaking their fists and demanding their flour. You remember the days spent in the cold, trying to wedge a replacement stone into place with numb fingers, cursing the stone, the wind, your own life. You remember the way the villagers looked at you as if you were cheating them on purpose, as if the universe itself would not dare to betray them if only you would work a little harder. And so you listen, you watch, you flinch at every squeak and rattle. When the wind shifts, you adjust the sails, careful not to lose a finger to the sudden lurch of the mechanism. When a belt sags, you tie it with a bit of rope, promising yourself you will fix it properly tomorrow, knowing you probably never will. It is a game of patience and endurance. The machine will break. All machines do, sooner or later. The only question is when and how badly, and whether you will have the strength, the tools, and the luck to patch it up and limp through another day. As the flour begins to pour from the chute, pale and soft and almost beautiful, you allow yourself a moment of pride, foolish perhaps, but real. You have kept the old monster running. You have defeated entropy for another morning, however briefly. The villagers will not thank you. They will never know what it takes to keep the stones turning, to keep their bread coming, to keep their complaints focused on something other than total disaster. But you know the mill's secrets, the creak of wood about to break, the whisper of a belt about to snap, the tremor of a stone about to fail. You know how easily your livelihood, your place in the village, your entire miserable life could vanish in the blink of an eye and the snap of a gear. And so you work, eyes and ears alert, heart beating with fear and grim satisfaction as the mill churns and grinds and the day wears on. You know it cannot last, but for now you are still a miller, and the mill is still almost in working order. The stones are turning, and for a brief spell the mill seems to work as it should. You know better than to relax. Machines have a talent for smelling complacency and choosing that exact moment to fail. But for now, you let yourself unload into the rhythm of the work. Scoop, pour, listen, scoop, pour, watch. The air is thick with flour, and in every breath you take is part hunger, part choking. You watch the grain vanish between the stones, spilling from the sacks with a kind of sluggish resignation. Each kernel has made its own journey here, weathered drought and wind, ducked the beaks of crows, escaped the greedy hands of children in the field. And now, in the dim belly of your mill, it is ground into dust, indistinguishable from all the other sacrifices that have come before. You wonder, not for the first time, if you are so different from the grain. The day drones on, filled with the dull music of labor. You check the stones and adjust the gears, always half expecting to find something wrong. You know the villagers think your job is simple: pour in the grain, collect the flour, and try not to steal too much of it. But you know what it means to spend a day in this dust, to breathe it until your chest burns and your eyes water, to listen for every offbeat in the groan and whine of wood and stone. You catch yourself daydreaming, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. You stare at the turning stones and imagine that you are somewhere else, doing something that does not grind your bones into powder. You picture yourself as a farmer, a shepherd, even a blacksmith, anyone whose work is hard but straightforward, whose reputation does not hang by a thread of suspicion. What would it be like to be a farmer? You imagine the honest ache of muscles after a day in the fields, the satisfaction of watching your own wheat grow tall in the sun. But then you remember the peasants' faces, drawn, hungry, already old by the time they are 30. They do not have it better. No one does. And yet, in your dreams, their work seems simpler, less fraught with curses and rumors. A shepherd, then. You picture wide hills and the silence of animals who do not complain. You could walk with the sheep, sleep beneath the stars, and never worry about the grind of gears or the sharp look from a neighbor who believes you are cheating him. But you remember the stories of wolves, the bitter cold, the loneliness that chews at a man's mind when all he has for company are beasts and the wind. Perhaps a blacksmith, the heat of the forge, the music of hammer on iron, the sense of power in shaping something with your own hands. But you have seen the blacksmith's arms, burned and scarred, hands twisted by years of force and fire. No, every life is hard in its own way. You know this, but you dream all the same. Sometimes, in your most secret moments, you imagine being a lord, living in a house with stone walls, real windows, and a roof that does not leak, wearing boots that keep your feet dry, eating meat more than once a week, never worrying about the price of grain or the wear on your hands. But you know, deep down, that you were not born for such a life. People like you do not become lords. People like you keep the flour flowing so the lords can eat white bread and complain that it is not as soft as it used to be. The daydreams never last long. The work demands attention, and reality has sharp elbows. A belt slips, and you scramble to catch it before it whips free and brings the whole machine to a grinding halt. You adjust the chute, kick a rat that has grown bold enough to sniff at your boots, and wipe sweat from your forehead with the back of your hand. The flour sticks, turning your skin to pale leather. You listen to the drone of the millstones, the clatter of the mechanism, the faint complaints of the wind outside. For a moment, you let yourself pretend it is the sound of the sea or the deep, contented breathing of a sleeping house. It is neither, but pretending makes the time pass. You try not to think about the future. The stones will keep turning, the villagers will keep bringing their grain, and you will keep grinding it down. The only real change is the slow, silent wearing away of everything: stone, wood, skin, patience. You tell yourself that one day you will leave this place. You will walk away and never look back, find a new village, a new trade, a new life. But you know, deep down, that the world is small and the mills are everywhere, waiting for someone like you to keep them running. A loud bang from the gears snaps you out of your reverie. For a moment, you think your luck has run out, but it is only a loose board, shaken loose by the rhythm of the work. You wedge it back into place, say a silent prayer to any god who might be listening, and return to your post. The stones keep turning, the flour keeps flowing. Your dreams, like the grain, are ground into something pale and fine, impossible to separate from the dust. And so you work, and so you endure, and so another day passes in the slow, grinding march of a miller's life. It is one of those facts about milling that no one ever puts in the stories. No matter how much work you do, no matter how careful you are, when it comes time to measure out the flour, everyone believes they have been cheated. Perhaps it is because the world is always taking from them, or perhaps it is because bread is life and flour is its uncertain promise. Whatever the reason, you know that the real work of a miller is not the grinding of grain, but the negotiation of grievances. The peasants return as soon as the stones have cooled and the last clatter of grain has died away. They gather in the yard, some feigning patience, others pacing like dogs denied a meal. You carry the sacks out one by one, weighed and tied, marked with chalk so no one can claim you have mixed them up. It does not matter. They will still claim it. The first to speak is always the one who believes himself clever. Today it is Piotr, the man who never says a word while waiting, but finds his tongue sharp and quick when it comes time to collect his due. You have taken too much, he says, not even bothering with a greeting. Last year, I brought less grain and left with more flour. This year, look at this, miller, it is a disgrace. You have heard the words 1,000 times in 1,000 variations. You have explained the mysteries of milling until you are blue in the face. Grain is not always equal. There is chaff and stone, rot and pest, rain that comes too soon or too late. But none of that matters when a man sees a smaller sack than he expected. You try to answer with the patience of a saint, though you are no saint, and your patience is brittle as old wood. It was not a good harvest. The grain is thin, full of stones. The stones grind what is there. I have measured fairly. Pyotr narrows his eyes. You say that every year. Maybe you should learn a new song. Others join in. Marek's wife, always quick with a complaint, clutches her flower as if it might vanish between her fingers. It is heavy, she says, her tone accusing. Heavy with what? You put stones in it, Miller? Water? Dirt from your boots? You almost wish it were true. Then at least you could explain the difference. The crowd grows more animated. Old Merrick himself sniffs the flour, as if his nose could detect your imagined theft. It is not the same as last year, he declares. It smells wrong. My wife says it bakes wrong. The bread falls. Whose fault is that, eh? You wonder if Marek's wife has ever eaten a loaf that pleased her. The accusations swirl. You take too much as your fee. Your stones are worn. You let rats run through the flour. You are cheating the poor for the sake of the rich. Someone brings up the story of the miller from the next village over, the one who was caught mixing sand into his flour. You have heard it so many times that you sometimes start to believe you were there yourself, holding the handful of sand. The argument is never about numbers, not really. You can weigh the flour in front of them, count every scoop, show them the empty husks and broken kernels left behind. It makes no difference. They are not counting sacks. They are measuring their fear, their hunger, the endless uncertainty of another winter. Some days, the accusations grow heated. Voices rise, fingers point, and for a moment you wonder if someone will throw a punch. You have seen it happen. Men wrestling in the yard, flour exploding into the air as they tumble. Once, long ago, you even took a blow yourself, a wild, desperate swing from a man who lost more than grain that year. You still feel the ache in your jaw when the weather turns cold. Today, you keep your calm, or the semblance of it. You offer to measure again, to show your scales and your chalk marks, to divide and count and explain. Some accept sullenly, eyes never leaving your hands. Others refuse, muttering curses as they shoulder their sacks and trudge away. A few linger, hoping for a sign of guilt, a slip, a secret revealed. You know, of course, that you are not blameless. No miller is. The fee you take is what keeps your family fed, your stones turning, your roof, mostly, above your head. Some years you scrape by with barely enough to pay your dues to the Lord, the priest, and the endless parade of tax collectors who come sniffing around for their cut. Some years, the temptation to take a little more is almost overwhelming. But you have learned that stealing from peasants is like stealing from the wind. There is never enough, and it always comes back to bite you. As the last villager takes their flour, you gather up the empty sacks and listen to the retreating complaints. No one ever thanks you. No one ever leaves satisfied. The only ones who do not complain are the ones who have already given up hope. You sit on the mill's threshold, rubbing flour from your hands, and watch the dust settle in the late afternoon light. The argument is over, but the bitterness lingers, clinging to you like the dust in your lungs. You wonder what it would be like to do a job where people do not hate you for doing it, then laugh at the foolishness of the thought. Such jobs do not exist, not here, not now, maybe not ever. The villagers will bake their bread and blame you when it sours, and when they are hungry, they will blame you again. You are not the cause of their misfortunes, but you are close enough to be convenient. You are the miller, and that is reason enough. You close the mill for the night, your mind still echoing with the accusations and suspicions. Tomorrow, you know, will bring more of the same. Grain to grind, flour to measure, arguments to endure, suspicion to swallow like bitter medicine. You sigh and stand, bones creaking, and head home, where your own family will ask why you are late and why there is not more on the table. You have no good answer, only the familiar ache of another day spent grinding hope into dust. You would think, after so many years, that the villagers would learn to accept disappointment as part of the bargain. You would think that the sight of another mediocre harvest, another light sack of flour, another winter on the horizon would at least inspire a sense of shared suffering. But people rarely choose solidarity when suspicion is on the menu. It starts, as it always does, with a muttered complaint that grows like a weed in the silent, anxious air of the mill yard. Someone, today it is Tomash, with his twitchy hands and mouth always twisted for a fight, says just a little too loudly that the scales are not right. He says it the way you might say the sky is falling, as if everyone already knows it is true. The other villagers shift uneasily, looking at each other, waiting to see who will be the first to agree. And so the tension tightens, invisible but real, strung between every person in the yard. You know the signs well: a quick glance, a clenched fist, the way Piotr stands just a little too close to Marek, daring him to say something. It is an old dance. You have seen it more times than you can count. No one really wants to fight, but no one wants to be the one who backs down either. The flour in their sacks is never enough, and neither is their patience. You step forward, your body already tired, your mind rehearsing the same lines you have used 1,000 times before. The scales are as fair as any in the county, you say, trying to keep your voice even, as if reason alone could calm men who are hungry and afraid. You can weigh your flour again if you like. If you find a fault, take it to the reeve. You offer the scales, the weights, the chance for public inspection, an invitation to accuse you to your face, with the whole village as witness. No one takes you up on it. They never do. The complaint is not about truth. It is about finding someone to blame, and the village knows that game by heart. Still, your offer has its effect. Some of the anger drains away, replaced by sullen silence. But not all. Tomish, sensing that his moment is slipping away, pushes further. Last week, Anna's flour came out short. The week before, it was Lena. Always someone, always the same. You are skimming, Miller. You have been caught before. His voice is sharp, but his eyes are pleading, pleading for someone, anyone, to share his anger. There is a murmur of assent, the sound of a crowd searching for the courage to become a mob. For a moment, you fear this will be one of those days, the kind that ends with broken teeth and split lips, or worse. You have seen the way desperation can turn a village inside out. You remember the stories your father told you of millers hanged from their own rafters or driven into the forest, never to be seen again. You do not want to be a story. You do not want to be a lesson for future millers. So you force a tired smile, hold up your hands, and speak with a steadiness you do not feel. If you think I have cheated you, take your sack and weigh it yourself. If you find it short, I will make it right. If not, let us be done with this. There is enough misery in the world without turning on each other. It is, in its way, an act of faith. Faith that reason can still reach people whose lives have taught them that fairness is for other people, other places. For a long, aching moment, you are not sure if anyone will listen. Then Anna steps forward. Anna, who never speaks unless she must, whose eyes are hollow with worry. She hefts her sack, weighs it in her arms, and shakes her head. It is what it is, she says softly. Blaming the miller will not fill our bellies. The moment breaks, and the danger passes. Some shuffle their feet and turn away. Others mutter under their breath, saving their anger for another day. Tomash, left alone with his outrage, scowls at you but does not move closer. You let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. But peace here is always temporary. It is not real peace, just exhaustion. You know the resentment will fester. It always does. You are the miller, the lightning rod for every disappointment, the scapegoat for every shortfall. When the harvest fails, when the bread is bitter, when the winter comes too soon, they will remember every slight, every rumor, every old story about cheating millers and poisoned flour. You are left, as always, to clean up the aftermath. You pick up the scattered flour, gather the empty sacks, and nod to the villagers as they trudge away. No one thanks you. No one looks you in the eye. You catch fragments of conversation as they leave, speculation about what you do with your extra flour, suggestions that you must be hiding money under the floorboards, warnings to watch your back. It is all as familiar as the sound of the millstones. You return inside, close the door, and sit for a moment in the half light. Your hands tremble just a little from nerves and anger. You stare at the lines in your palms, so deeply ingrained with flour and dust that they look like they belong to an old statue. You wonder what it would be like to work in a trade where people did not despise you, where your honesty was not doubted as a matter of course. You know better, of course. There is no such trade, not here, not now, maybe not anywhere. You stand and sweep the last traces of spilled grain from the floor. You check the stones, the gears, the levers, because work is the only answer you have, the only way to keep moving. Outside, the voices fade, the day grows thin, and you are left alone with your thoughts and your mill. It is not much of a peace, but it is all you are ever likely to get. You might think, as a miller, that your hardest battles are with the peasants, the daily squabbles over flour and measure, the endless accusations, the simmering suspicion that follows you like a shadow. You might think that the complaints and the threats are the heaviest taxes on your soul, but you would be wrong. There are burdens heavier than angry villagers, the burdens that wear velvet and speak in the name of God or King. It always happens in the afternoon, after the last flour sack has been measured and the last quarrel has been patched over with weary diplomacy. You see the dust on the road first, then the silhouettes, the Lord's reeve in his well mended coat, the priest in his black robes, both with eyes that see more than you wish. They walk slowly, as if time is on their side, because it is. Time belongs to those who never feel its weight. You steel yourself, wipe your hands on your apron, and greet them with the careful deference that is your only shield. You bow, but not too deeply, show respect, but not subservience. They nod in return, each with his own flavor of contempt. The reeve is the first to speak. Good day, Miller. The Lord sends his regards. You wonder if the Lord even knows your name. He has never set foot in your mill, never tasted the dust that coats your lungs, never seen the cracked stones and the mice that scurry in the dark. Yet every season his share comes due, as predictable as the changing of the wind. The reeve presents you with a list, written in a hand as thin and neat as a spider's web. On it, the tally of grain brought to your mill, the expected weight of flour, the Lord's portion, always more than seems fair, always rounded up. You do not argue, you know how these things go. The reeve's pen is sharp, but his tongue is sharper. Last year, the Lord's share was higher, he reminds you. You must not let your stones grow lazy. You want to say something about the harvest, the weather, the rot, the endless theft by rats and time. You want to point out that the Lord's barns are never empty, that his table is always full, but you only nod and sign the paper, offering the agreed upon portion from your dwindling store. The reeve does not thank you. He only tucks the list away, as if collecting taxes is a sacred ritual. Then comes the priest. He stands a little apart, hands folded over his belly, eyes flicking from you to the sacks and back again. Have you remembered the tithe, Miller? He asks, as if there could be any doubt. The church's share is less than the Lord's, but it bites deeper. The flour you hand over is not just a payment, it is a promise, a plea for mercy in the eyes of heaven. You remember a time, years ago, when you fell short on the tithe. The priest stood in his pulpit the following Sunday and preached about the sin of greed, about the fires of hell that await those who steal from God. The villagers stared at you all through the sermon, their eyes filled with the suspicion that never really leaves them. Since then, you have paid your tithe in full, even when it meant your own children went without. The priest accepts your offering with a little smile, as if he is doing you a kindness. The Lord sees your sacrifice, he intones. Pray you do not forget it next time. You want to ask if the Lord sees your cracked hands and your empty table, if he hears the grumbling of your stomach at night. But you do not ask. You only bow your head and murmur the proper words. Sometimes the priest lingers, making small talk about the weather or the state of your soul. He asks after your wife, your children, as if he really cares. But his eyes are always on the flower, on the tally, on the measure of your devotion. He leaves with a blessing that feels more like a warning. God watches over honest men, Miller. Be sure you are one. The reeve and the priest leave together, their footsteps unhurried. You watch them go, your heart heavy with a mixture of anger and resignation. You know what the villagers say about you, that you are rich, that you skim from every sack, that you sleep on a bed of gold. If only they could see the reckoning that happens in your mill every week, the steady draining of your store by hands far cleaner than your own. You return inside, counting what little is left. The Lord's share, the church's tithe, your own meager portion. By the time the division is done, there is never enough. Sometimes you wonder if you should just keep more, risk the wrath of the reeve, the curse of the priest. But you know where that path leads to ruin, to the stocks, to a sermon in which your name is spoken like a disease. You sit by the window, watching the dust motes swirl in the fading light. Your children will ask for bread at supper, and you will give it to them, thin, hard, not enough. Your wife will ask if you paid the tithe, if you settled with the reeve, if you kept enough for your own. You will say yes, and she will look away, already worrying about the next shortage, the next tax, the next round of blame. In the stories, millers are always cunning, always fat, always laughing at the misery of others. You know better. You know the weight of accounts, the way the world is carved up by men who never lift a sack or sweep a floor. You know that whatever you have, it is only ever on loan. You close the ledger, bank the fire, and try not to think about tomorrow. You are a miller. You keep the peace, pay your dues, and carry the blame. There is nothing else to be done. The seasons turn, as they always do, and with them come years that seem determined to prove just how little a man can live on. There are good years, of course, though good is always relative. A little extra grain, a little less suspicion, a brief, fleeting sense that perhaps next year will be easier. But the lean years come more often. They are the rule, not the exception, and they bring with them a hunger that gnaws at everything, your store, your patience, your very soul. The worst of it is the waiting. Lean years do not announce themselves all at once. They creep in, slow and insidious, on the back of a spring frost or a summer drought. You hear it first in the talk among the peasants, the way voices drop, the way faces turn toward the sky with a hope that feels more like dread. At first, there is still enough to eat, enough to share, enough to pretend. But as the days shorten and the stores dwindle, the hunger becomes impossible to ignore. You try to stretch what little you have. You patch sacks that should have been replaced years ago. You sweep every last kernel from the corners, gather the dust and chaff, and tell yourself it can be made into something edible. Your children look at you with hollow eyes, not yet old enough to hate you for it, but old enough to understand that their stomachs will not be full tonight. Your wife grows thinner, her voice sharper, her patience shorter. The mill's silence, when there is no grain to grind, becomes a kind of accusation. The peasants come less often. When they do, their sacks are lighter, their eyes heavier. They stand in the yard, shivering in thin coats, clutching what little they can spare for the promise of bread. Their complaints take on a new edge, not anger, but desperation. Please, Miller, just a little more. My children are hungry. The old ones cannot work. I will pay you back after the next harvest. You want to help, and sometimes you do, taking a little less for your fee, slipping them an extra handful of flour when no one is watching. But you know you cannot help everyone. Some nights you dream of a table filled with bread and meat, and you wake with the taste of ashes in your mouth. There is always someone who suffers more than you. That is the only comfort you have, and it is a cold one. When a neighbor's cow dies, when a child takes sick and there is no food for the fever, the villagers gather in whispers and blame the weather, the land, the will of God, and sometimes, when they are feeling especially helpless, they blame you. If only the miller were honest, they say. If only he took less. If only he prayed harder. If only he were not so cursed. It is easier to blame a man you see every day than a sky that never listens. You barter and beg, just like everyone else. When your own grain runs out, you visit neighboring villages, offering your services, hoping for a share of their meager stores. Sometimes you come home with a sack of coarse barley or a few stale loaves, more often with nothing but the ache in your back and the shame in your heart. Your children learn not to ask where you have been. Your wife learns not to hope for more than she can see. The debts pile up, as debts always do. The Lord still wants his share. The priest still demands his tithe. You learn to make do with less. Thinner bread, watered ale, a stew that is more stone than sustenance. You find yourself thinking about the rats with a new kind of envy. They always seem to find a crumb, no matter how carefully you sweep. In lean years, the boundaries of decency grow thin. You see neighbors steal from each other, wood from a fence, a handful of beans from a drying rack, an old chicken that wandered too far from its coop. You understand the temptation. You watch your own stores with suspicion, knowing that hunger makes good men do desperate things. You hide what little you can, lock the doors you once left open. You do not blame those who take, but you do not forgive them either. The worst part is the shame, not the hunger itself. You have learned to live with that, but the knowledge that you, the miller, the one everyone believes is rich, are just as poor as those who come to you with empty hands. Some days you consider packing up and leaving, starting over in a place where no one knows your name, where the debt and disappointment do not cling to your skin. But you stay, as you always do, because leaving is just another way of giving up. In the evenings, you sit by the cold hearth and listen to your children's quiet breathing, the sound of your wife moving restlessly in the dark. You count what is left, a handful of grain, a heel of bread, a promise that things will be better next year. You do not believe it, but you say it anyway, because sometimes a lie is all a family has. The lean years are the real masters here, and you are just another servant, bowed by hunger, bent by debt, grinding hope into dust, one day at a time. You return home later than you meant to, though time no longer means much in a household where hunger is the only clock. The sun is gone, and the chill of evening has seeped into every wall, every seam of your clothes, every tired joint in your body. You push open the crooked door, and the first thing you notice is the silence that comes before a storm, the silence that follows too many days of counting and recounting what you do not have. Your wife stands at the hearth, stirring a thin gruel that might have once been soup, her back rigid, her shoulders tense. She does not look up as you enter. She does not need to. You both know this routine as well as you know the steps to every other kind of argument. The rhythm of accusation and defense, complaint and justification, resignation, and the slow return to bitter acceptance. She speaks first, and her words are like stones, carefully chosen and thrown just hard enough to hurt. There is no meat tonight, no cheese either. The bread is gone, and there is only this. She gestures to the pot, and I would not swear there is anything in it but water and a memory of peas. Her voice is sharp, but beneath it you hear the fear, the endless worry that never leaves her eyes anymore. You sigh and remove your boots, careful not to track too much flour into the single room house. I paid the reeve, I paid the priest, I gave what I could. The villagers brought less grain this week, the harvest. She cuts you off, not with anger, but with that bone deep exhaustion that comes from too many years of scraping by. The harvest is always bad, is it not? It is always someone else's fault. The Lord takes his share, the priest takes his tithe, and you take what is left. But what is left, Miller? Is it enough for your children? Is it enough for me? Her hands are clenched around the wooden spoon. You see the bones beneath her skin, sharp, bird-like, as if hunger is slowly carving her into something smaller. You have no answer. You never do. We are not the only ones, you say, a defense so old it is meaningless. There are those with less, she snorts, a sound that is almost laughter, but not quite. Then let us be grateful for our misery, since there are others who would envy it. Shall I tell the children they are fortunate to be only a little hungry? She slams the spoon against the side of the pot, a hollow, echoing sound. You are the miller. They say you are the richest man in the village. You should see how the women talk at the well, how they say our roof is falling in because you drink away your earnings, how they say you have silver hidden under the floor. Why do they not see this house? Why do they not see our empty table? You want to defend yourself, but what is there to say? The villagers see what they want to see, a mill, a job, the rumors of plenty. They do not see the way your wife mends the same shirt for the third, fourth, fifth time. They do not see how you count out the last handful of grain, how you lie awake at night wondering how to make it stretch one day further. You do not tell her about the times you have eaten nothing all day, saving what little there is for the children. She turns on you now, voice trembling with anger and fear. I did not marry a rich man. I did not ask for more than I could carry. But I am so tired, tired of scraping bowls, tired of patching holes, tired of the children asking why there is never enough. I see the wives of other millers. Why do they wear new shoes? Why do they have chickens in their yards, real cheese in their larders? What are we doing wrong? You do not remind her that those other wives are not much better off, not really. That the stories told at the well are just another kind of currency, traded back and forth in place of bread or hope. Instead, you spread your hands, palms up, as if to show her the emptiness is not just in your pockets, but in your very bones. I am doing what I can, you say, voice quiet, a confession rather than a defense. Every day I fight the stones, the wind, the rats, the men who would take what little we have. I try to keep enough back for us, but if I take too much, the reeve comes with his ledger, and the priest with his sermons, and the village with their torches and knives. I am not the Lord. I am not the priest. I am only the miller for a long moment. The only sound is the gentle simmer of the gruel, the tiny popping of bubbles in a pot too thin to hold more than a few dreams at a time. You look at your wife and see not just anger, but something deeper, fear, yes, but also shame. She hates that she is asking, hates that she cannot make something from nothing, hates that the children will know what it is to go to bed hungry. Finally, she sinks onto the bench, her shoulders slumping. I know you are trying. I know it is not your fault. But sometimes I wish you could do more. Sometimes I wish the world were different. You sit beside her, and together you spoon out the thin meal, each of you careful to take less, saving more for the children. You eat in silence, the kind of silence that is too tired for anger, too old for hope. Outside, the night presses in, cold and indifferent, while inside you listen to the sound of your children's quiet hunger and the echo of your wife's old dreams. You wonder, not for the first time, what it would be like to have something left to quarrel over, something more than the simple, endless lack. But this is your lot, to fight over crumbs, to ration love and patience like grain, to measure out open spoonfuls, always knowing it will not be enough. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, you will be the miller again, and she will be the miller's wife, and the world will ask you both for more than you have to give. It is always the roof, you think, as another drop of cold water lands squarely on your forehead. Always the roof, with its sagging beams and mossy thatch, groaning under the weight of another endless, unkind rain. There are moments when you imagine the roof as a living thing, an old, stubborn animal determined to let in as much weather as possible just to spite you. The day begins, as so many do, with the sound of water finding its way in. Drip, drip, drip. You wake to the rhythm of leaks, the steady percussion of a roof slowly failing overhead. You count the drops, partly because it is all you can do, and partly because each one sounds like another coin leaving your pocket. Another day's work undone. Your wife is already up, busy shifting buckets and bowls to catch the worst of it. The children are bunched on the one dry patch of floor, shivering in their sleep. The air smells of wet straw and despair. You tell yourself this is only temporary, that the rain will pass, that the roof will hold a little longer, but you have been telling yourself this for years, and the roof has not believed you once. After a thin breakfast, you gather what tools you have: a bent knife, a hammer with a handle worn smooth by worry, a few handfuls of nails you have scavenged from old boards and broken carts. You collect bits of thatch, rags, anything that might keep the water out for another week, another storm, another useless hope. Your wife offers you a bundle of old cloth and you take it, both of you pretending it is a real solution. Outside, the rain is relentless. It stings your face and soaks your sleeves before you are halfway to the ladder. The yard is a sea of mud, the mill hunching in the distance like a guilty secret. You climb carefully, the rung slippery under your boots, the whole house shuddering with every gust of wind. You know how easy it would be to fall, how quickly an injury could turn a bad season into a disaster. You move slowly, testing each step, wishing for a miracle, and knowing better than to expect one. From the roof, you see the whole village, gray and sodden, every house patched with the same desperation as yours. Smoke rises from chimneys, thin and miserable, and you wonder if anyone is warm, if anyone is dry. You work with numb fingers, pushing old straw into holes, nailing bits of wood across gaping gaps. Every patch is temporary, every repair a plea to the sky. Not today, not this storm, not yet. The rain seeps in anyway, running along beams and dripping onto beds and tables below. You curse under your breath, but cursing does not fix leaks. You try to remember when the roof last kept out all the rain, if it ever did. Maybe in the days when you were young, when the world seemed less determined to grind you down. Or maybe you just did not notice, too busy with dreams to care about cold feet or wet bread. By midday, you are soaked through, shivering, your hands raw and splintered. The tools slip from your grasp, the nails bend, the patches sag under the weight of new water. You look at your handiwork and see only the next failure. The next morning you will wake to the sound of dripping and the sight of your wife gathering buckets in the dawn. You wonder if you should even bother, if it would not be easier to let the roof collapse and start again with nothing. But you keep working because that is what is left to you. One patch at a time, one small act of defiance against the slow ruin of everything you have built. You tell yourself it is enough, though you know it is not. When you finally climb down, your wife meets you at the door. She tries to smile, but the worry in her eyes betrays her. Did it help? She asks, not expecting an honest answer. For now, you reply, and both of you pretend to believe it. You peel off your wet clothes, wring out the rags, and hang them by the fire, a fire that hisses and sputters, threatened by the same dampness that creeps into your bones. The children eat their supper with hunched shoulders, glancing up every time a drop lands nearby. Your wife mutters about next year, about needing more straw, about what will happen if the winter is long. In the quiet of the evening, you listen to the rain, louder now, as if mocking your efforts. You lie awake, counting the leaks, feeling the cold creep in through every crack and patch and seam. You know there are worse problems: a failed crop, an empty mill, a sickness in the village. But tonight, it is just you and the roof, and the endless battle between water and will. You close your eyes and try to dream of dry days, of whole houses, of a life where your labor lasts longer than the next storm. But the rain has a way of drowning dreams. It seeps into everything, washing away hope, leaving only the stubborn resolve to try again tomorrow. So you drift off, not into sleep, but into another long night of counting drips and patching holes in your heart, knowing the morning will bring the same battle and you will fight it, because that is what millers do. And maybe, just maybe, the roof will hold, at least for one more day. Sleep, when it finally finds you, is thin and nervous, always one ear open, always one eye on the dark. You have learned, as every miller learns, that disaster has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. Hunger, cold, rot, and rats may chip away at you, but fire is a different kind of terror. Fire does not nibble, fire devours. The irony is not lost on you. The mill, damp with rain and grief for most of the year, seems the least likely place for a blaze. But you know better. One stray spark, one careless ember from the blacksmith's forge across the lane, one forgotten lamp left burning through the night, and the whole place could go up in a heartbeat. A sudden, roaring inferno that leaves nothing but blackened bones and rumors in its wake. Your neighbors tell stories about mill fires. Some even remember them. You have heard about the blaze that took old Millar's place 2 villages over, how the fire leapt from floor to roof, fed by a feast of dry grain dust, until nothing remained but stone and ashes. They say Millar was inside when it happened, and that you can still hear his voice when the wind howls at night. You do not believe in ghosts, but you believe in fire. So you watch every evening. Before you dare close your eyes, you make the rounds, up and down the creaking stairs, past the sacks of flour, the bins of grain, the precarious pile of old kindling by the back wall. You check every lamp, every candle, every place where spark might meet straw. You run your hand along the wooden beams, feeling for heat, listening for the snap and hiss that means danger is already there, just waiting to show its teeth. Your wife thinks you are obsessed. She says you worry too much, that you will wear yourself out with all your checking and double checking. But she was not there when the lightning struck the mill roof 3 summers ago, when the smell of burning filled the air and the thatch smoldered for days. You can still see the black scar on the beam above the hopper, a reminder that nature does not care about your plans, your labor, your life. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night to the phantom scent of smoke. You lie in the darkness, heart racing, straining to hear the sound of crackling flames. You tell yourself it is nothing, just the wind, just a dream, just the thousand small fears that come with your trade. But you get up anyway, bare feet on the cold floor, to make one more circuit, to be sure. You would rather lose sleep than everything else. The villagers do not help. They tramp through your mill with muddy boots, careless with their torches and their tempers. The children sneak inside to play among the sacks, hiding with candles pilfered from their mothers' kitchens. Even the priest, when he visits to collect his tithe, leaves a trail of melted wax along the threshold. Every careless act is another risk, another silent threat. You scold them, of course, but they only laugh until the day it is their bread that is burned black in the ashes. You have learned to keep water close, barrels and buckets placed at strategic points, ready to be grabbed at a moment's notice. You know the spot where the old ladder is propped, the fastest way to the roof, the location of every possible escape. You dream sometimes of fire, red, wild, greedy, swallowing the mill, the house, the whole village. You wake with your mouth dry, the taste of ash lingering long after morning comes. The worst nights are the ones when the wind howls from the north, rattling the windows, making the candles flicker. On those nights, you sit by the hearth, wide awake, staring into the dying embers. You remember every story, every warning, every narrow escape. You think of all you would lose, the roof you patched with your own hands, the sacks of flour you fought to fill, the faces of your family huddled close against the dark. Fire does not care about your effort. It takes everything without remorse. You know, too, that if the mill burns, it will not just be your loss. The whole village depends on you, though they would never admit it. Without the mill, their grain will rot, their bread will fail, their hunger will grow sharper than ever. And you will be left with nothing but blame and regret. Another miller whose story ends in smoke. So you keep watch, night after night, season after season. You guard against the disaster that comes not as a thief in the night, but as a blaze in the open. Your vigilance is thankless, your worry invisible. If you succeed, no one notices. If you fail, no one will forget. It is a lonely duty, but it is yours. You wear it like a second skin, itchy, uncomfortable, but impossible to remove. You lie awake, listening for the whisper of flames, the one disaster you cannot mend with patches and hope. And when, finally, exhaustion pulls you under, your last thought is always the same. Please, not tonight. Let it hold. Let it last. Let the dawn come with all still standing. The work does not end when the sun goes down, and it certainly does not end with you. You have children, thin, quick, restless shadows who dart through the mill and the house, always hungry, always watching. Their lives, like yours, are measured in handfuls of grain, in the patching of old clothes, in the weight of expectation. There are days you envy them their energy, and days you pity them for what they will inherit. It falls to you as it fell to your father and his father before him to teach them what it means to be a miller. Not just how to move the sacks or tend the stones, but how to live in the gray margin between your own need and the needs of the village, between what is fair and what will let you survive. You show them how to check the gears for wear, how to listen for the sour note in the song of the millstones, how to keep the flour dry and the rats at bay. You teach them how to keep their mouths shut and their heads down when the villagers come with their complaints. The children learn quickly, as children must when there is no choice. Your eldest, a boy already too old for his years, carries sacks that are nearly half his own weight. He does not complain, but you see how the strain bends his shoulders and hardens his eyes. The younger ones fetch water, sweep the dust, scatter the chickens, and count the flour with a seriousness that makes your heart ache. You would spare them if you could, but there is nothing else to do. The world does not wait for children to grow up. It pushes them forward, grinding them down as surely as the stones grind the grain. Sometimes you catch them at play, making games out of labor, inventing stories about giants in the mill or magical flour that turns to gold. Their laughter is brief, wary, always interrupted by some new task or sharp word from your wife. You try not to think about what kind of future you are giving them. You remember your own father's hands, rough and steady, guiding yours as you learn to set the stones, to balance the beams, to keep the fire from burning too high. You remember the way he never smiled in the mill, how he saved his rare moments of kindness for the end of the day when the world was quiet and the work, for a few hours at least, was done. You explain to your children that being a miller is more than just a job. It is a burden, it is suspicion and hard labor, and never quite enough to go around. You tell them that people will blame them for every misfortune, bad flour, bad bread, bad luck. You try to warn them that honesty is a poor shield, that sometimes survival means taking what you can and hoping no one is watching too closely. You see the confusion in their eyes, the questions they do not know how to ask. You wish you had better answers. Your wife worries for the children. She wants them to learn their letters, to know something of the world beyond flour and debt. Sometimes, on rare evenings, she tells them stories of places where bread is white and soft, where no one goes hungry, where children play in sunlit fields instead of shadowed mills. You listen too, pretending not to see the longing on her face, the hope she tries so hard to keep alive. But the reality always returns. In the mornings, you wake them before dawn, rousing them from cold beds to colder chores. You teach them how to mend the sacks, how to patch the roof, how to keep the fire banked low, but not so low it goes out. You show them how to hide what little is left from prying eyes and greedy hands. You scold them when they are careless, praise them when they are quick. You are strict, sometimes harsh, and always tired. You wonder if they will hate you for it one day, or worse, if they will simply become like you. In your quieter moments, you wish you could offer them more, a life with choices, with the possibility of rest or happiness, or at least enough bread to go around. You wish they could run in the fields instead of the mill, dream of something bigger than survival. You think about sending them away to apprentice with a blacksmith, a tanner, even a priest. But you know what apprenticeships cost and what kind of lives are waiting in those other trades. The world is hard everywhere. At least here, you can keep them close, keep a watchful eye, give them what little safety you can. One evening, as you show your eldest how to oil the gears, he asks if you were ever afraid. You almost laugh. Almost. You tell him the truth. You are always afraid. That is how you know you are still alive. He nods, as if he already knew. You see the weight of your words settle on his shoulders, another burden he will have to carry. The children grow, as all children do, learning to fit themselves into the narrow space that is their inheritance. They learn the trade, the fear, the silence. They learn how to endure. And you, well, you do your best to teach them the only lesson that matters. That even in a world that grinds you down, you must keep turning, keep working, keep watching over those you love. Because if you do not, no one else will. The work of a miller is measured not in profits, but in losses. You learn this quickly if you are wise. If you are not wise, you learn it the hard way. Either way, you come to understand that your life is a ledger written mostly in red. At the end of every grinding day, after the stones have fallen silent and the last peasant has slouched home with their precious sack of flour, you begin your real labor. You sit by the light of a smoky lamp, your back aching, your head thick with dust, and you try to make sense of numbers that never add up the way you wish. There is a little pile of grain that has spilled and been swept away, a little more lost to the rats you could not catch, a sack that tore and was patched too late, flour dust that rose up in the air and will never be bread for anyone. You lay out your ledger, a book as worn and patched as your coat. Its pages are stained with years of sweat, marked with calculations, and crossed out hopes. You record what came in, what went out, what was taken by the Lord and the priest, what was demanded by your own household. There is always less than you expected, always less than you need. You remember, dimly, when you were young, believing the mill was a place where wealth was made. You saw the constant flow of grain and flour, watched the coins change hands, and thought there must be profit in it somewhere. But profit is for stories told by those who have never worked a day in flour and fear. What the world calls profit, you have come to know as survival, barely, barely. Some nights, you count the flour left in the bins and find it lighter than it should be. Was it theft, bad luck, or simply the slow, invisible leak of life through 1,000 cracks? Did a peasant slip a handful into their sleeve while you turned away? Did the rats find a hole you missed? Or was it just the mill itself, grinding everything down until nothing is left but dust? You sit at your crude table, tallying up losses you cannot recover. There is the flour you gave away to Anna, the widow with too many children and no one to help her. There is the extra handful you slipped to your own son after he worked all day without complaint. There is the meal you kept back for your wife, so she would not see just how thin the broth was getting. You tell yourself these are not real losses, but when you count what is left, the numbers do not care about your justifications. Sometimes you remember the years when the mill turned better, when the harvest was kind, when the rats were few, when the village still believed in miracles. Those years were never as good as you recall, but memory has a way of polishing its own illusions. Now, in the flickering light, all you see are gaps and shortages, corners cut, hopes deferred. You count the tools you have lost too, a bent knife here, a hammer there, a length of rope that snapped when you needed it most. Each repair takes a little more from what little you have, and each day brings something else that must be patched, mended, replaced, or done without. And always, you count the things that can never be tallied on a page. The sleep you lost watching for fire, the time spent arguing over every measure of flour, the years stolen by hunger and worry. These are the real losses you realize, what the mill takes from you that you can never get back. Your wife, ever practical, asks you what is left at the end of each day. Did we come out ahead? She says, as if the answer could ever be yes. You shake your head and show her the ledger. She sighs, a sound full of old disappointment. At least we have enough to eat tonight, she says, and you both pretend it is a comfort. There are nights when you are tempted to close the book, to stop counting altogether, to simply do the work, live day by day, and let the numbers take care of themselves. But you cannot. Counting is part of surviving, even if the numbers bring no peace. You count what you have because it is the only way to see how much you have lost. And because on rare nights, the numbers are not quite as bad as you feared, you wonder what it would be like to live in a world where each day's work left you with more than you started. A world where the mill ran smoothly, where the villagers paid what they owed, where the rats and the weather left you alone. You cannot imagine it, not really. You suspect such a world has never existed. So you count your losses, close your ledger, bank the dying fire, and crawl into bed next to your wife, who is already asleep, her dreams as thin as the blankets you share. Tomorrow you will open the book again and start the count anew. In the dark, you hear the mill settling, an old friend, an old enemy, groaning quietly through the night. You wonder if anyone in the village realizes that every morning, when the stones begin to turn, it is not hope that drives them, but the relentless, exhausted habit of a man who has learned to count his losses and keep going anyway. Even when the mill is quiet and the last sack has gone, the village is never silent. There are always voices, always whispers moving like the wind through the gaps in the shutters. At night, when you think the world is asleep, the true business of the village begins. The trade of rumors, the weighing of blame, the spinning of stories to explain why things are as hard as they are. Sometimes these stories drift toward you and your mill, carried on a breeze of suspicion and fear. The villagers are quick to blame what they do not understand, and what they cannot see, they invent. You are not surprised, not anymore, when your name appears in their tales, when the bread sours, when a cow dries up, when a child wakes with fever. The people look toward the edge of the village, to the creaking mill, and they wonder if something unnatural is turning with the stones. It starts innocently enough. You overhear the women at the well lowering their buckets, voices low and careful. It is not right, the way the flour is this year. Too heavy, too gray. My mother said the same happened once when there was a witch in the village. They glance around to see who might be listening, then look away quickly when they spot you. Soon, the men are talking too. At the tavern, over sour ale and tired faces, they remember every accident, every small misfortune, and draw a line straight to your door. Remember when old Janek's oxen took sick? That was the same week the miller's fire burned blue. Ask anyone. Blue, I tell you. It is a sign. My grandmother said so. You would laugh if it were not so predictable and so dangerous. The stories grow in the telling. Before long, you hear them say that you grind more than grain in your mill, that you keep strange hours, and sometimes lights flicker at your windows long after midnight, that you speak to the rats and the crows, that you leave offerings at the old tree beyond the stream. You know the real reason for your late nights. You are counting, patching, worrying, doing the endless, thankless work that keeps the village fed, if not content. But the truth is rarely as satisfying as a story, and the village, starved for comfort or a scapegoat, prefers stories. It does not help that your mill, with its ancient beams and groaning stones, is the perfect stage for superstition. When the wind blows just so, the whole building seems to wail. When the full moon rises, the flower glows a pale, ghostly white in the darkness. Children dare each other to run up and touch the door at night, screaming with laughter and fear as they race back to safety. You see them sometimes and wonder which will grow up to accuse you first. Your wife tries to ignore it. People will talk, she says, trying to sound unconcerned, but you see how she keeps the children close when a rumor grows louder. She burns a sprig of juniper above the hearth, just in case, she claims. You do not argue. In lean years, even the most sensible people hedge their bets against bad luck. Sometimes the stories twist into threats. A dead chicken left on your doorstep, feathers plucked and bloody, strange marks scratched into the lintel of your door, signs meant to ward off evil or perhaps invite it. You wake in the night to stones thrown against your shutters, laughter fading into the dark. You do not know who does these things, but you have your guesses. The priest preaches about sin and temptation, careful not to name names, but you hear the warning in his words. There are those who turn to dark ways in times of hunger, he says from the pulpit, his eyes drifting over the congregation until they settle for just a moment on you. The villagers shift uneasily in their seats, some crossing themselves, others glaring in your direction. You could protest, defend yourself, demand proof, but you know that truth has little weight in the scales of fear. The more you deny, the more convinced they become. You keep your head down, do your work, try to appear as ordinary and harmless as possible. It is a fine line, too humble, and you are hiding something, too confident, and you are flaunting it. There are moments in the quiet of the mill when you wonder what it would be like to have the power they fear you possess, to call down rain or keep away frost, to fill your bins with a word, to silence the whispers with a gesture. But power, you know, is not for men like you. It is a story told by those who have none. The rumors never truly die. They settle like dust in the corners, waiting for the next bad harvest, the next illness, the next reason to look for blame. You have learned to live with them, as you have learned to live with the ache in your back and the cracks in your roof. They are part of the job, part of the life you never quite chose. Still, when the wind howls and the mill creaks, when the villagers talk a little too quietly and stare a little too long, you remember the old tales of millers who vanished, of midnight trials, of flames in the dark. You know how easily fear turns to anger and anger to violence. So you listen to the rumors, count your own heartbeats, and keep grinding the grain day after day. Because in the end, stories feed no one. Only flour does. And for all their suspicion, they will always need you, at least until the next story comes. Night is the most dangerous time. The shadows stretch long, and the village, always wary of you during the day, becomes something more menacing in the dark. It is easy, when the moon is high and the wind howls, to imagine that every creak in the floorboards, every scrape at the door, is a hand reaching for what little you have left. Perhaps you are right. In a hungry year, envy is more persistent than rats and more destructive than any rumor. You know the look in a desperate man's eye. Hunger makes everyone reckless. You have seen the way some of the villagers linger as dusk falls, their gazes drifting from the sagging eaves of your house to the closed door of the mill. You must be keeping something back, you have heard them say, sometimes not bothering to lower their voices. His children are thin, but not as thin as mine. No one says it to your face. It is always at a distance, behind hands or under breath, in the twilight space between accusation and confession. You do not sleep well, especially not now, when stores are low and hope lower. Before you go to bed, you check the bolts on the doors, test the shutters, walk the perimeter with a stick in one hand and a lantern in the other. Your heart beats faster than your footsteps. You glance over your shoulder, half expecting to see shapes moving among the shadows, slipping between the trees, or crouched by the fence. Sometimes you find nothing. Sometimes you find footprints where none should be, bare, muddy, a child's, a man's. Once, long ago, you would have trusted your neighbors. You would have left the mill unlocked, the storehouse open. But trust is just another luxury you can no longer afford. Now you stash what little you can in the loft or behind the false wall at the back of the mill, places where only someone desperate or clever, or both, might think to look. You wish it did not come to this, that you did not have to see your friends and neighbors as possible thieves. But hunger has a way of stripping the world of sentiment. You recall the first time the mill was robbed. It was years ago, a lean summer when the river ran dry and even the lords grumbled over empty granaries. You woke to find a sack of flour missing and muddy footprints leading back toward the woods. You never learned who took it, but you remember the feeling, a mix of anger, shame, and, yes, relief. Relief that someone had taken only what they needed to eat, and not your life, your tools, or your family's small safety. Since then, you have learned the signs. The smallest scratch at the window, the careful way a door hangs open when you know you closed it, the absence of a rat, taken perhaps for stew. The villagers are not cruel by nature. They are simply tired, desperate, driven to risk what little peace there is for one more mouthful, one more day. But not all who come at night are hungry villagers. Sometimes it is strangers, bandits, drifters, men from other towns who have heard that a mill always keeps a bit of grain hidden, that the miller always has coin tucked away, that no one will raise a cry if he loses it. Those are the nights you fear most, the nights you sit by the dying fire, clutching your stick or the rusted blade you keep behind the door, listening to the dark and wondering if you will have to fight for everything you have managed to keep. You are not a violent man, but you are not a fool. You have heard of millers who went to sleep rich and woke up with nothing, or did not wake at all. The mill is your livelihood, your shelter, your children's only inheritance. You will defend it as best you can, even if all that means is staring into the dark until your eyes ache, waiting for a sound that might never come. Your wife sometimes pleads with you to let it go, to trust in fate or the goodwill of the village. But you have seen how quickly goodwill sours when bread runs out. We are not their neighbors at night, you tell her. We are the obstacle between them and hunger. She does not argue. She only sits a little closer, her own fears as heavy as yours. On rare occasions, you catch someone, a boy, maybe, or a man you have known since childhood, his face twisted by guilt and need. You do not turn them in. What would be the point? The Lord's justice is swift and merciless, and you have no desire to see a neighbor's hands chopped off for a handful of grain. Instead, you send them away with curses and threats, sometimes with a warning, sometimes, if the need is clear, with a little bread tucked into a coat. You are not proud of this, but neither are you ashamed. You do what you must, as does everyone else. The envy never truly fades. In daylight, the villagers pretend it is not there. They nod as they pass you, talk of weather and work, and save their bitterness for the nights when you cannot see their eyes. Sometimes you wonder if it would be easier to give up, to let the mill go, to become just another hungry mouth in a world full of them. But you have a family, a duty, and even the smallest scrap of security is worth defending. So you keep your vigil night after night, with the dogs barking and the wind rattling the shutters. You sit by the fire or pace the yard, stick in hand, eyes sharp for the glint of envy in the dark. You pray, not for wealth or luck, but simply for the strength to last one more day, one more night, to keep what little you have from being taken by hands just as desperate as your own. And when the dawn finally breaks and you see that nothing has been lost, no flower stolen, no door broken, no neighbor forced by need to betray himself or you allow yourself the smallest sigh of relief. But you know it is only for a day, only until the next hungry night, only until the next storm of envy passes through the village, searching for a new place to land. This is your life, not just grinding grain, but defending hope against the darkness, one sleepless night at a time. Every morning, your bones protest before your eyes are even open. Pain is your first sensation, a constant companion that settles in your back, your knees, your wrists, wherever flesh meets toil. You roll from the thin, lumpy mattress, muscles stiff, joints refusing to bend without complaint. The ache is so familiar you almost do not notice it anymore. It is simply the price you pay for being a miller, a slow tax collected grain by grain, cough by cough. You cough as you always do, the sound dry and hollow. It shakes loose dust from your lungs, a dust that never fully clears. No matter how tightly you wrap a cloth over your face, no matter how often you wipe the surfaces or open the door to the wind, flour finds a way in. Your voice, once strong, is hoarse more days than not. Some mornings you spit blood into the straw behind the mill, pretending not to notice the bright, alarming red. The peasants call it the miller's lung. They joke about it when they cough, too, but there is a shadow in their eyes. You look at your hands, skin rough, knuckles split, nails ragged and sometimes blackened with dirt and old bruises. Your joints swell and throb, especially in the cold and the damp. Your fingertips are numb in winter, your palms blistered and raw in the busy seasons. You have lost count of the cuts and scrapes, the little infections that swell up and slowly, stubbornly fade. Sometimes, at night, your fingers seize and cramp, so you curl them around a warm cup and pray that in the morning they will obey you once again. There is no doctor for your kind, only the village healer, an old woman with a sack of herbs and a lifetime of superstitions. She tells you to drink infusions of nettle and toad flax, to chew willow bark for the pain, to rub your chest with lard and salt to draw out the bad humors. You try everything, some out of hope, most out of desperation. Sometimes the bitter teas soothe your cough for a night. More often, you wake with the same tightness in your chest, the same weight in your bones. Your wife tries to help. She brews concoctions she learned from her mother, garlic boiled in wine, onion poultices, compresses of cabbage leaves. She washes your wounds with warm water and dries them with careful hands. She mutters prayers as she works, half to God, half to herself. When she thinks you are not listening, You hear the fear in her voice. If you get worse, what will we do? Who will run the mill? Who will feed the children? You have no answer, so you swallow the tease and the pain and hope your body will last another year, another season. The children see your suffering, though you try to hide it. The oldest asks fewer questions than he once did, simply watching as you massage your swollen joints or press a hand to your side. He has already started coughing too, a thin, wheezing sound that makes your heart twist. You tell yourself it is just a cold, just the dust, just the work. But you remember your own father, how he coughed until he could not stand, how he died in the mill, white dust on his lips, fingers curled forever around the wooden lever. Some nights you dream of drowning, of choking on a cloud of flour so thick it becomes the only air you know. You wake gasping, your mouth dry, heart pounding in the darkness. The healer says these dreams are a sign of imbalance, of too much damp in your humors. You suspect they are simply the wages of your trade. Illness makes you slow, and slowness is unforgiving. You push yourself, force your legs to climb the stairs, force your arms to haul the sacks. Every step is a reminder that you are not as young as you were, that the mill does not care for your pain, that the stones keep turning whether you can keep up or not. On the worst days, you work through tears, blinking them away before anyone can see. Pain is private. It is shameful to let it show. There is a special humiliation in asking for help. When the fever runs too high, or when you cannot stand for the ache in your side, you must call for your son or even your wife to take over. The peasants see this, and you can feel their relief and their judgment. The miller is failing, they whisper. He will not last the winter. You see their eyes measuring your weakness, already imagining who will replace you, who will inherit the mill, and the endless suspicion that comes with it. There are days when you wonder how long you can last. You calculate, as you always do. If you get through the next month, the next season, maybe your son will be strong enough to take your place. Maybe the village will have to accept him. Maybe he will not suffer as you have, though you know this is just another lie you tell yourself to keep moving. The healer gives you one last piece of advice. Rest, she says. Let the pain settle. Let your body heal. You almost laugh. Rest is for those who can afford to do nothing. For the miller, there is only the work, the cough, the pain. You thank her, take her bundle of herbs, and return to the mill where the stones are already turning and the day is waiting for you. You grit your teeth, breathe through the ache, and begin again because there is nothing else to do. At last, the world outside is silent, if only for a moment. The day's voices are hushed, their arguments packed away with the sacks and ledgers and worries. You move through the house in the dim glow of a guttering candle, careful not to wake your children, careful not to think too much about tomorrow. There is nothing left to do but sleep, or what passes for sleep in a miller's home, a brief, uneasy truce with the darkness, won by sheer exhaustion. You check the doors one final time, feel for the latch with stiff, numb fingers. You listen for the telltale scurry of rats and the sigh of the wind poking at the cracks. Your wife is already beneath the covers, curled small and tight as a fist. Her breathing is soft but uneven, punctuated by the little coughs and murmurs of a woman who worries even in her dreams. You lower yourself onto the bed, every joint flaring with the effort. The mattress groans beneath you, its straw stuffing long since crushed into a thin, lumpy mat. You do not remember the last time you slept through the night, some distant childhood before the aches began, before you learned to fear fire and famine and the judgment of your neighbors. Now, every hour is measured not by rest, but by the interruptions of pain, the cold, the faint sense that someone or something is always awake, always watching. For a while, you stare into the darkness, letting your mind wander over the day just finished. The tally of complaints and bargains, the sounds of grain and grinding stone, the dull ache of your limbs. The worries pile up like sacks in the corner. Is there enough flour for tomorrow? Will the rain come again? Will the gears hold? What will you do if you cannot work? If your son grows sick? If the village turns against you? You listen to your children breathing in their makeshift beds. Each sound is a strange comfort, proof that, at least for tonight, you have kept them safe, if not fed. You do not let yourself wonder how many more nights you will be able to say the same. Hope is a luxury for men with full bellies and clean hands. Somewhere in the dark, a rat scurries, bold and unhurried, as if it knows the place is its own. You sigh and turn over, pulling the thin blanket higher, trying to find a position where your back does not scream and your thoughts do not race. You fail, as you always do. Sleep comes not as rest, but as a slow, reluctant surrender, an escape you fight even as you crave it. Your wife murmurs in her sleep, a soft question you cannot answer. You reach for her hand beneath the blanket, surprised to find it colder than your own. You squeeze gently, offering what comfort you can, feeling how thin and fragile she has become. You remember your wedding, the hope that once seemed as steady as the river. You remember laughing once. You wonder what became of that man, what became of that laughter. You close your eyes, and the day replays itself. The grinding stones, the cries of the villagers, the cough in your chest, the leaking roof, the empty bowl, the shadow at the door. There is no room in your mind for dreams. There is only memory, only the endless loop of days just like this one. You think of the stories told about millers, how they are greedy, how they hoard, how they thrive while others starve. You think of how small and cold your world really is. You think of how you will rise before dawn, scratch at the same rashes, cough up the same dust, argue the same arguments, and carry the same burdens until your body gives out or the mill finally breaks. You wonder briefly if anyone will remember you when you are gone. Perhaps as a warning, perhaps as a villain in a cautionary tale, perhaps not at all. You know what the villagers will say. He had enough, and still it was not enough. He took and lost it all. No one will speak of the aches in your bones, the worries in your heart, the nights spent sitting up by the fire, guarding against hunger, thieves, and flames. And still, as the darkness presses in, you realize you have done what was needed, if not what was wanted. You have survived another day, and tomorrow you will rise and do it all again, not out of hope, but out of habit. The habit of men who have nothing left but the stubborn refusal to give in. The candle finally gutters and dies. You listen to the familiar sounds, your wife's slow breathing, the wind at the eaves, the restless shifting of your children, the quiet, secret world of the rats, and you drift into a sleep so shallow it barely deserves the name. Tomorrow, the mill will need you, the villagers will need you, the world, indifferent and unchanging, will need you to do what you have always done. Wake in the dark, bear the weight, and grind on, while hope, like flour, sifts through your fingers and is lost. And that, more than anything, is what it means to be a miller.